Montage of goals coming up. Galchenyuk, Kuznetsov, Tom Wilson.
Great.
Have a good show, man.
Thanks, buddy.
Pass quickly to Delarose, and he just one time it wide. Didn't have a lot on it. And bumps his man off the puck. And that's Galchenyuk to the net. Scores! Good forechecking by Delarose. And Galchenyuk took it straight to the goal. Backhands it home. And it's 1-0 Montreal. They'll try it here with Kuznetsov right side. And to the right circle. A shot. He scores! Welcome back, Evgeny Kuznetsov. A shot from the top of the right circle that beats Price on the glove side. It's 1-1 here in Montreal. The shot here from Wilson. He scores! Tom Wilson in from the dots and past Price and going low with 5:11 to go in the first period. Washington in front 2-1.
All right. Welcome. This is Hockey Primetime. I'm Conor McKenna. Happy Sunday. We're back with you on Sunday. We've been doing Sundays all March long, and we've definitely enjoyed it. It is a beautiful, beautiful day here in Montreal as I'm looking out the window in the Hockey Primetime studio out into beautiful St. Henry in the southwest borough of Montreal, and it feels a little bit like spring. I don't want to jinx it, but we've been very lucky. I know a lot of our listeners in the Northeast have not really been in the last couple of weeks, right? You guys have had snowstorms and nor'easters. I don't think I've ever heard the term nor'easter more times than I have in the last month or so. And so, anyway, we've avoided a lot of the snow here in Montreal, so I'm very happy about that. I'm Connor. Laura Saba is here with me. If you're watching us live on Periscope or Facebook Live or YouTube Live, then you can see the magic happening. I encourage you to do that. Hello, Laura.
Hey, Connor. How are you doing?
I'm well. That sounded, I don't know. That didn't sound very natural.
It
the way that you
very
said that.
Chipper,
Yeah,
isn't it?
sounded weird.
I got caught checking the weather because whenever Connor talks about how good it is, the following Monday we'll get a huge snowstorm or something like that. But
do you find that to be the case?
You know what though? It's one of those where we know it's coming. We've been kind of lucky with weekends in the last few weeks.
Is there a snowstorm coming?
No, there is none. No, I was just checking. So I was in the middle of checking that when you threw to me, and so I just got caught off guard. But luckily, we are going to have a few good days. And you're right, it is very beautiful. It's been a beautiful weekend. I've gone outside. I've become a totally different person just by the sheer ability to go outside for longer than a few minutes at a time.
It totally changes how you feel. And I think anybody who lives in a climate in which winter is nasty and bad and
long.
You're not some fanatic who goes skiing every weekend, which I used to be. I just don't have time, and I wouldn't be able to do the show if I went skiing every weekend. But that's like the glass half full thing, right? Outdoor hockey would be another one, although there's less and less of that happening these days. Excuse me, but it's something about nice weather, sun shining, double-digit weather, or I don't know what it would be in Fahrenheit. I'm not a good Fahrenheit Celsius comparison guy. But people just come out. It's like you're hibernating. It really is. Winter is hibernation period. You realize you haven't seen people for a long period of time. You go back to your favorite bar or restaurant, and they're like, "Wow, where have you been?" And you're like, "It's true. I haven't been here in 4 months." And anyway, so it is. It feels nice. It feels good. We do have an 11-degree high forecast for Thursday, so I'm very excited about this. I really don't like winter, and this has been a tough one in Montreal. I don't think anybody would doubt it. For hockey fans, for Canadiens fans, it's been a really, really long grind watching this team sort of toil in mediocrity for a long, long time. But anyway, I'm very, very excited. And normally, this feeling of spring, it also, well, I don't know normally, but I'd say more often than not in the last decade or so, it's
a harbinger of the playoffs.
It's the playoffs. It feels like playoffs, right? And there's that buzz and excitement that we've talked about here that just is it. Let alone, I just don't think it's here. I didn't feel it last year with the Canadiens, even though they were heading towards that matchup with the New York Rangers that they ultimately lost in the first round of the playoffs. The buzz wasn't the same. And I think, people who live here and spend a lot of time following and going to Canadians games have sort of noticed this too. The buzz is just not there surrounding this team. What happened? A couple of things happened, and it all started when at least in my opinion, it all started when Marc Bergevin traded away PK Subban, and there has been a number of things that have happened since then, and there's no point in really getting into it. But I guess what the difference has been this year, and we saw it last night, and you just heard some of the highlights. Excuse me. Was Carey Price is getting lit up. Carey Price is having a very, very difficult time stopping the puck and doing his job. And of course, in the Twitter age and in the age of people, everybody having a platform to comment, of course, this makes people very angry. If you point out that Carey Price is having a bad season, excuse me, but I'm a little under the weather. I apologize. And people get very upset. They get very triggered, as we've pointed out before, right? There's all kinds of triggers. The PK Subban trade is a trigger. Mentioning that Carey Price is having a bad season is a trigger. And Price himself will admit it. Claude Julien admitted it after the game last night.
He's not himself.
Well, maybe
he's having a bad season. I mean, that's for sure. But he doesn't even seem to be. You know what I mean? Like sometimes he's battling it, and psychologically you can tell he's struggling, and he seems to just be resigned to the fact that he's having a bad year, that he's dealing, I don't know, like I'm even surprised that he's back. What's the point? How many games are there left in the season? Why wouldn't you just take a break?
Well, now everybody has an opinion on this. I don't think that you tell a guy that he can't play if he's healthy and making millions of dollars to play, and the fans are paying the price of admission,
right,
presumably to watch this guy play. I think that you play, and any pro athlete will tell you the same thing. You're going to tell a guy that he can't play if he's healthy and good to go. And the fact is, the Canadians want him to play. The way that he's playing, get him in there as much as possible to make sure you don't pick up any points, because they essentially, at least in my estimation, don't have much of a chance to win the games that he plays. The proof is in the pudding here, and you can sort of look at the stats. And remember, of course, this becomes even worse when you keep in mind that he's got this 8-year contract that's kicking in next season, and I'm sure he's not happy with the conversation surrounding this. And the guys like me are going on the radio talking about how I think you got to be at the very least a little bit concerned about what's happening with Carey Price right now, given that the largest contract by a long shot in the history of this franchise is about to kick in next year. Listen, I mean, I admire optimistic people, right? But at some point, you do have to wonder. He's going to turn 31 this summer. Now, Antti Niemi has been one of the two positive stories surrounding the Montreal Canadiens this year, the other one being Brendan Gallagher. 2. I've counted them. I've kept track. There's been 2 positive stories. And Antti Niemi's been great, right? We've talked about Stéphane Waite, the Canadiens goaltending coach, and a guy who used to work with Niemi in Chicago, arguably during the best years of Niemi's life, and certainly when they won a Stanley Cup together. And he was bad, right? If you remember, Antti Niemi got blown out as a member of the Pittsburgh Penguins early in the season. He then proceeded to get sort of blown out as a member of the Florida Panthers, and it looked like he was done. The Canadians picked him up off the scrap heap, and he worked with Stéphane Waite and turned his season around. Now,
it's really astonishing. Like what? I would never have bet that. Like you could have asked me, and I would have been like $1 million. He is going to fail, and he's going to be put right back on waivers within a couple weeks.
He had a tough time. Don't forget in Dallas as well, right? They bought out his contract, and Jim Nill's sort of gamble on a high-priced goaltending tandem really it never sort of worked out. But anyway, so Niemi's come in, and Stéphane Waite is getting all this credit, and it's very nice that people are giving credit to Stéphane Waite, the Habs goaltending coach, for the success that Niemi is having. But I think, you got to be fair here. I think Niemi deserves more of the credit. He's the one out there doing it and getting the job done. .930 save percentage, actually, in fact, better than .930 save percentage. So he's been playing and goaltending at an elite level for the Canadians, and has cost them probably that they would have the worst record. I believe they would probably have the worst record in the standings if not for the fact that Niemi has given them this great goaltending, and everybody is singing the praises of Stéphane Waite, and with good reason. I mean, this guy's got a reputation as one of the best goaltending coaches, if not the best goaltending coach in hockey. However, I really do think that it's strange that we're not talking about the fact, and the far more important story, that Carey Price appears to be broken, and the Canadians' meal ticket, literally their meal ticket, is right now playing the worst hockey of his life at age 30. And at some point, I think you have to point out, like, well, does Stefan Waite get any? Do we talk about the fact that he's the goaltending coach? Do we only talk about it when the goalie's going well?
Or
Can we focus on the fact that the number one goaltender, the quote unquote best goalie in hockey? How many times have we heard that?
Not this year.
I've heard it a few times this year. But can we talk about that? Like, listen, Stefan, maybe spend less time working with Antti Niemi and start working with Carey Price. A little bit more
time with the expensive goaltenders.
So there's that, and then there's the injury concerns as well, right? Now, remember, and I would imagine, and put yourself in Carey Price's position in the offseason this year. What's going through your head when you know that Andrei Markov's going to be gone, a guy who's been in front of you literally your entire career in the National Hockey League, and Alexander Radulov, the sort of engine that drove the Canadiens last season, is going to be gone as well. Excuse me. And they were replaced with David Schlemko and Ales Hemsky. Was that what the plan was? Mark Bergevin sort of hilariously said that maybe David Schlemko was going to play on the first pairing with Shea Weber. He also suggested Jordy Ben might be the guy for that job, and also famously said that the Canadiens' blue line was better this year than it had been a year ago, right? If you're Carey Price and you're seeing this happen, what's your opinion? What's going through your head? All right, I've got to have a .935 save percentage so we can squeak into the playoffs this year. Basically, I guess that's what the plan is. And I'm sure that you have opinions about that. Imagine how mentally straining that could be to somebody. And then we heard that there was all kinds of stuff going on. Carey Price struggled out of the gates this season. Then he missed a significant period of time. Then he came back. He was okay a little bit in November. Then he missed more time. There was that concussion. Then there was all kinds of crazy rumors that were flying around in Montreal. People are talking about this and that, all kinds of off-ice stuff. Who knows where the truth actually lies in this situation? You know, I don't believe most of what I hear, but at some point you do have to wonder if there's at least some fire with all this smoke. But the effect that has on Carey Price, chronic fatigue syndrome and various things that apparently were affecting him and his mentality. And how important is that for a goaltender? You always hear this about goalies, right? They're all weirdos. They all live in their head, right? And if your head's not right, then you're going to see results, I believe, like what we're seeing from Carey Price. The guy's got the 36th worst save percentage in hockey. There's only 31 teams. This is not a good thing, and you can blame it all you want. And this is the other thing, right? I mean, people want to have their cake and eat it too here, and they'll say, it's not his fault. And fine, I understand that there's plenty of blame to go around. And I don't mean to imply that the Canadiens' difficulties are solely on Carey Price. You know, people say, look at that blue line, look at the team in front of him. Fine, absolutely. I don't disagree. But he has had bad teams in front of him for most of his career and has looked really good. Here's the other thing. Antti Niemi, with the same guys, with the same guys playing in front of him, has a .930 something save percentage. So how do we explain that? It just it's strange, and people have their claws out right now, and people are very sensitive, and it's been a very trying season. But the big story in this offseason is going to be what the Canadiens do to help Carey Price and improve the roster and the guys in front of him. B, can Carey Price bounce back and come into next season and perform at a healthy level in terms of his mental health and, of course, in terms of his physical health, the knees, the concussions, and various other things that have been going on. So we'll see what happens. But, that was another ugly one last night. Maybe what they should do, and you see the logic, right? They give Niemi Buffalo on Friday, and then they give Price the Washington Capitals on Saturday.
Done the other way around.
I think that might not be the worst idea. Give him Buffalo. Give him an easy one, because he's not up to the task, as far as I can tell, of facing an elite NHL offense. Pittsburgh put up 5 on him, and then 6 goals last night from the Washington Capitals. That's the third time in the last 45 games that Carey Price has given up 6 goals in a game. I believe prior to that, and Arpon Basu wrote about this in The Athletic, he went over 200 games. That's how long it took him, over 200 games, to allow 6 goals 3 times. Now it's happened 3 times this season. Coming up next, let's talk Bruins. There's a team that's good, and enough about the Canadiens. Amalie Benjamin covers the Bruins. She's a feature writer at NHL.com, and she's going to be joining us on the other side. And we'll get into it. How about Don Sweeney? You want to talk about a guy rehabbing his reputation? Don Sweeney's certainly done that, hasn't he? Remember when he traded Dougie Hamilton? Remember when he drafted those 3 guys back-to-back-to-back in the first round. Are any of those guys in the NHL? Anyway, we are going to talk to Amalie Benjamin about the Bruins and changing perceptions next. This is Hockey Primetime here on SiriusXM NHL Network Radio, also streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com.
Hockey lives here.
Seconds left. Patterson trying to get it out. Can't. The Bruins get it free. Slapped out in front. They score! Marchand able to drive to the front of the net. And David Pastrnak reached out to his right and shoveled it by a fallen Lettinen to make it 3-2 Bruins with 11 seconds left.
Yes, another win for the Boston Bruins, and they're getting some good news. Looks like reinforcements are on the way. That was a bit of a wild one. Come from behind victory, and David Pastrnak. Hard to believe how much that guy's played, given how young he still is. Life is good for Bruins fans right now, isn't it? Yes, they lost earlier this week to a red-hot Columbus team, but a couple of wins since then, and onwards and upwards. Today, it's the Minnesota Wild who host the Bruins, and we're going to see Patrice Bergeron out there. Let's talk Boston Bruins with Amalie Benjamin, as she is rejoining the show. We've had her on before. You can read her work at NHL.com. Hello, Amalie.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for making time for us here on your Sunday. I was talking about it and was recently reading about Don Sweeney, and it's amazing, isn't it, how much his reputation has changed in the last couple of years. There was the Dougie Hamilton trade. There was the infamous back-to-back draft picks while not taking Matthew Barzal, who's now turning into a superstar player. But he is now beloved and respected as a general manager. Amazing how things can change, isn't it?
It really is. That was sort of, I would say, probably the low point for Don Sweeney in Boston, that 3 in a row draft pick draft. But yeah, certainly it's hard to be annoyed at anything the Bruins are doing these days. And Don Sweeney certainly looks really good right now with the team he's put together, with the rookies that are coming on. One of those draft picks, in fact, was Jake DeBrusk, who is doing pretty well this season for the Bruins as a rookie. So, yeah, all of a sudden things are a lot more rosy than they were.
And it's interesting, too, right? Of course, you got to give Sweeney credit for making the move when he did, which also looks like a stroke of genius, which was letting beloved coach Claude Julien go and promoting Bruce Cassidy from their American Hockey League affiliate. And that's appears to be looking really good right now, too. Curious what your perspective is on that. I think that here in Montreal, the naysayers will sort of say, well, look at where the Canadians are now, and they're terrible, and Claude Julien is the coach, and look where the Bruins are now, and Claude Julien is not the coach. It seems sort of oversimplistic, but what do you think about the fact that the Bruins really seem to turn it around after firing Julien?
To me, that's unfair to Claude Julien. I think the Canadians' issues go far beyond him, and he is a very good coach. He's a guy who had a lot of success in Boston. He won a Stanley Cup. He won a Jack Adams Award. This is not some schlub off the street. This is a very good coach. Teams run into these situations where at some point it's time for a divorce, and that was the time had come. It had been a decade. It was time to move on, and I'll be honest, I wasn't sure that it was the right move at the time, but Bruce Cassidy has turned out to be the perfect pick for this team, a team with a lot of young kids. As I said, he's a guy who has been steeped in AHL. He's been there for a long time, since he got a brief chance to be a head coach in the NHL with the Capitals about a decade ago, more actually. But it really has ended up having been the right move at the right time for this team. And if Gallant wasn't doing what he's doing in Vegas, you have to think Bruce Cassidy is, right up there for the Jack Adams this year.
I think that's totally fair. And the other thing is, you got to look at the rosters, right? The Bruins roster was very different the last game that Claude Julien coached, and a lot less of that youth movement and all those exciting young players that you're mentioning here, and guys like Charlie McAvoy playing a big role. And then you see, talk about an embarrassment of riches this week, getting Ryan Donato in there. And you talk about a debut. That was pretty amazing, wasn't it?
Not bad for a guy who's still taking classes at Harvard,
Well, that's insane. He is going to class during the day and playing NHL hockey at night?
Not entirely, but he did stay back. He makes his NHL debut on Monday, has 3 points, including his first career goal, and then he stays back in Boston on Tuesday while the rest of the team takes its cushy charter jet to St. Louis, so he can go to class at Harvard. And he is committed to taking his books on the road and to finishing out his junior year, finishing out the academic semester with the eye to eventually graduating.
That is incredibly impressive. That's just so cool. And I think that says volumes about the guy. I don't know if I got to say, if I'm making like almost $1 million a year before taxes and I can play pro hockey, I'm not sure if I would stay in school. But this guy makes Goodwill Hunting look like an idiot. That is amazing. So, and Harvard, no less.
I don't know though. His father, Ted Donato, longtime NHL player, is the coach at Harvard. So I'm sure that isn't hurting him wanting to get that degree.
That's a fair point. Do you know what he's studying?
I don't. You know what? It's sociology. He's a sociology major.
Interesting. All right. And Patrice Bergeron, do we know, are they getting him back tonight?
It looks like he will be back in the lineup, and not a bad addition. End of the season, get a guy like that back in your top line.
Well, and I guess that's another thing that is so impressive, right? If someone had told me they're going to lose Patrice Bergeron for an extended period of time at the beginning of this season, I would have said, well, already I didn't think the Bruins were going to be that good. I'm like a lot of people in that respect. But I would have thought they would have been in a massive amount of trouble. But what does it say about them that they were able to keep winning games without Bergeron?
It's truly astounding. I mean, you put in a guy like Riley Nash, and all due respect to Riley Nash, he's not Patrice Bergeron, but that line has just sort of kept trucking, and you get a career year from a guy like Riley Nash. Those are sort of the special things that you say, something is going on with this team when things like that happen. I mean, you look the last couple of games at what the Bruins defense has looked like, what their third and fourth lines have looked like, with the entire roster seemingly injured right now, and they're still winning, which is amazing. But yes, absolutely. I mean, Patrice Bergeron is, probably the hardest guy in that roster to replace easily, and they've done pretty well in his absence. Not that anyone is, telling him to stay out any longer than absolutely necessary.
But it must be nice for him too, right? Talking to guys about injury recovery, and that's something you always notice, is the feel that you need to get back. Otherwise, the team could be in serious trouble. It's a serious luxury to see the team winning games and sort of succeeding without you, and gives you sort of the luxury of maybe taking another day or two while thinking about it. The Bruins are 6-2-2 in their last 10 games, and as we mentioned, they're in Minnesota to face the Wild tonight. They get Tampa one more time this year, Amalie, and during the regular season. They're 4 points back, but they do hold those 2 games in hand. How important, or is it important, that they catch the Lightning with those games in hand?
Well, I do have to correct you. They actually get the Lightning twice.
Do they?
They have the Lightning at home in Boston. They have the Lightning at home in Boston, and then they go down to Tampa the last week of the season. So that is a significant thing. I mean, they could catch the Lightning. Whether or not if you have your druthers, you always want to move up in the standings and have home ice throughout if you can get it. We've all sort of, for a really long time, been assuming that they'll get the second pick and they'll match up with the Maple Leafs. I mean, it's looked like that for basically months. But there is a chance that they could make something happen. Yeah, they face them twice within a week. First game is on Thursday in Boston.
Huh. And they are all but assured of a first round playoff series and home ice advantage during that first round playoff series, is what I meant to say there. What do you think about the matchup with the Leafs? It seems kind of unfair that 200-point teams should have to meet in the first round, but that's the format that we have in the National Hockey League. How do you like the Bruins-Leafs matchup?
I think one of the things that is going to be important in that matchup is home ice advantage. And I've talked about this before, just the fact that when you can get that Bergeron line against the Matthews line, when you have the ice, when you have the last change, and you can make that matchup happen, that's a significant advantage for the Bruins. The last time they played in Boston, Matthews was pretty much neutralized against that Bergeron line that is so good defensively. So I think, that could be a significant factor in the Bruins' favor. Up until that win that they had the last time in Boston, the Leafs had kind of dominated them for a while. I think it was maybe 6 straight losses for the Bruins. So this is not a gimme by any means, but I think home ice could play a big role in any series there. I
can't wait. If that is in fact how it plays out, I'm very excited for that first round series, and definitely something to look forward to. Amalie, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
That is Amalie Benjamin at NHL.com. I'm Conor McKenna. This is Hockey Primetime on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio. How's your Sunday going? It's sunny. It's beautiful here in Montreal. Wherever you're at, we'd be happy to hear from you. We've got our Facebook page. We've got our Twitter page. And the show is streaming live as we speak right now on Facebook Live. Hi, Mark Zuckerberg. How you doing over there? With Laura Sabat, the producer of the show, my name is Conor McKenna. Our next guest, who will be joining us in just a few moments, is Jim Cerny of the Sporting News, based in the New York area. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on there. I also want to get into these general managers meetings. The NHL GM meetings happened this week. Has anybody ever accomplished less over a 3-day period of time? We'll talk to Jim Cerny about that next. This is Hockey Primetime here on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio and streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com.
swing, circle with a shot, he scores!
Sirius XM NHL Network Radio. Sirius XM 91.
Well, close enough.
Sergachev, a quick counter, Gord. Back into the Toronto end. Center point. High slide. Here's McDonough open. Score! Boy, what a snapshot for Ryan McDonough. It's 3-2 with 18:36 remaining.
Yes, Ryan McDonough, now a member of the Pittsburgh Penguins, not too far away, and a longtime member of the New York Rangers, still just 28 years old. And yes, the Penguins looking pretty good earlier today, although I was not fortunate enough to see the overtime game-winning goal, as at 3 o'clock sharp, NBC, at least in the NBC affiliate in Montreal, cut away in the middle of the 3-on-3 overtime, and we got to see some golfers warming up for a couple of minutes. When we cut back, there's Brian Rust and Sidney Crosby celebrating, so I can now assume that the Penguins did win that game. I must say that was at least slightly frustrating as a television viewer to have that happen. Jim Cerny is with the Sporting News. I know he was watching the game, and since I saw he described the game-winning goal on Twitter, I will assume that he saw it. Good afternoon, Jim. How you doing?
Yeah, Connor, I'm a little bit luckier than you, I guess. But if you love watching Sidney Crosby's brilliance, and if you revel in that kind of thing, yeah, you would have liked this game winner. What an unbelievable vision, he has, ice vision, and picking up Brian Rust in front of the net, for a gimme for Rust. I think 98% of other players in the league would have shot the puck. When you watch the replay, you'll see. You would assume that he was shooting the puck, and no, not with eyes on the side of his head, back of his head, and all that. Instead, he finds Russ perfectly on the tape, and bing, bang, boom, it's all over.
It is amazing, and I wonder if, what it's going to be like if that decline or when that decline eventually happens. But I've heard people talking about that this year, and I just don't see it. I saw somebody say that, like, it was his points per game. He's down to 1.05 points per game. It's like, yeah, is that bad? I don't know. I mean, what do you make of the talk of Sidney Crosby's decline?
Yeah, I don't buy it. I know the goals are down and technically points per game are down. I think he showed you last year that when he feels a challenge, he can ramp it up to levels that most players can't even dream about. And I think there was something about McDavid and Line and Matthews getting all this publicity last year that kind of lit a little fire under him. And he said, yeah, I'm going to show you. I'm still Sidney Crosby. And, yeah, okay, so the goals are down. He's not going to score 40 this year. He may not even score 30 this year. But, you just see the brilliance, from Sidney Crosby on a play like the game winner today. The goal the other day, cutting to the net, batting the puck up in the air and then out of the air and into the back of the net. Things that, us mere mortals can't even imagine, being able to do. And, and then, the other part is he knows too that, and this whole team knows, that whole Penguin team knows, what are they going to be judged on at the end of the day? It's just get into the playoffs, whether you finish first, second, third, whatever. It's what you do when the playoffs start. That's what they're judged on. They're judged on a team that's going for a three-peat right now. So, I think you'll see him up on a whole other level, come mid-April.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. And those guys know it. The experience factor. I'm convinced that the Canadians sort of had it. The Penguins had it in sort of I don't know in second gear maybe for the first 35 games of the season, and then they were like, all right, let's go. We got to start winning some games, and then they started doing that. Now here they are heading towards a first round home ice playoff series with the Columbus Blue Jackets, who've played very good hockey lately. But that goal you were talking about. Now, granted, it was scored against the Montreal Canadiens, which has to be taken into account, but still. It's you talk about us mere mortals. I think the crazy thing about that Crosby goal in Montreal the other day, where he bats it one way, then bats it the other way out of the air, it's unusual to see something in hockey that maybe you've never seen before. it's not just that mere mortals like you and I, Jim, can't do it. It's that most guys who play in the National Hockey League can't do that, which is sort of, I guess, what makes Crosby so special. I mean, it's one thing to do that like in practice. It's another thing to do it in an NHL game. Although, again, maybe a bit flattering to Montreal to call them an NHL team at this point. Jim, I wanted to ask you about the general managers meetings. My feel for this week was like, did this really, in 3 days, all they managed to accomplish was deciding that the Situation Room was going to handle the reviews for goaltender interference? Am I missing something? Has anybody or has a group of people ever had a less productive 3-day period spent in Boca Raton, Florida?
Well, it could be how you evaluate productive. If you mean actually trying to improve the game and make it better and solve a problem, that's clearly a problem. Well, yeah, then I'd have to side with you. But if you're talking about golf and getting some sun and, maybe hanging out by the pool for a while with your buddies, yeah, it was probably a very successful 3 days. I'm with you. I'm surprised, because, or maybe I shouldn't be surprised, but I was surprised that not enough general managers had the stomach to really address the issue. The issue is not even so much the review. It's, will you let us know what the heck goaltender interference is? That's the issue to me. Yes, I get the coaches challenge reviews, and that's a secondary part of this. So what you're doing is, kind of attacking or trying to address, if you want to even say that they addressed anything, a secondary issue here. Get to the heart of the matter. And, I get it. Probably most GMs, they probably said, this is probably the type thing we should attack during the off season. And to me, you have the opportunity before the Stanley Cup playoffs, before we crown a champion, and possibly a championship is affected by, not knowing what that call is going to be or how that call is going to be decided, a goaltender interference call. So by not getting to the heart of the matter and pushing it off, which they likely are now to the off season, could be, just a terrible, terrible mistake. Could be a terrible black eye for the league. And even if they dodge the bullet, that it doesn't affect a series or a game 7 or an overtime or whatever the case might be in the playoffs, they still did wrong by the game, in my opinion. They did not do enough. They did not address the core issue here.
Yeah, exactly. I'm with you, and that's the thing. I mean, I don't even think it's a question of if. They play a lot of games in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Something is going to happen, and here's hoping that it doesn't have a large or meaningful impact on who ends up hoisting the Stanley Cup in a couple of months. It just it burns me, and I know. I mean, I talk to guys who are down there covering it every day on my show in my sort of day job. And it's how it is. I mean, those guys are sort of sitting around all morning waiting, and then finally the general managers come out. But it really, it's 4 hours of meetings per day. So as you mentioned, there's plenty of leisure time and downtime, not just for the general managers, but for the people covering it. It sounds like a pretty plum gig to be covering it. Like, nice work if you can get it, especially getting out of, I mean, it is the month of March. Everybody's in the Northeast has been dealing with these crazy snowstorms the last little while. I mean, seems like a pretty sweet situation to be in. All right, so
but they didn't attack that, and you know what I was going to mention too. The other thing that drives me, maybe even crazier than not knowing what goaltender interference is was his skate on the ice or was it off the ice? Is he skating over the blue line? Is he onside? Is he offside? And of course, that reared its head in the Stanley Cup Finals last year. That's another one that they got to get right. That they're not addressing and they're not getting right. Our level of disgust, Connor, we could go on and on.
It's that is the frustrating thing, though. Like, and this is also, you want to talk about expectations. We don't come into this. I don't think anybody who's been watching this for a long time comes into it with expecting anything major, right? So this is the thing about it for me that's so fascinating, is that I'm not expecting. I know how the NHL is. I know how these guys are. They are very, very slow to do things and to embrace change, if they do so at all. But even I, with my low expectations, have been amazed by how little they accomplished this time. You know?
Yeah, it's funny. I told someone the other day, I said, it's hard to be underwhelmed when you expect to be underwhelmed, and yet I was underwhelmed.
Right, yeah. All right, so I know you had a chance to catch up with Ryan McDonough the other day, and it's sort of a fascinating Q&A and sort of one-on-one interview that you had there, and an opportunity to sort of get inside the mind of a guy with a young family who sort of is uprooted and is forced to move. What were your impressions chatting with McDonough the other day?
Yeah, I've known Mac for a long time, obviously, when he first came to Rangers training camp back in 2010. And, so there's a level of trust there between reporter and player. And, Mac is a guy who's very approachable, really good guy, understands the job of the media, was captain of the New York Rangers, an original 16, the New York market. So he gets all of that. The thing about McDonough is he gives you very little. He's polite, he's friendly, but he doesn't really open up. It's just his way. It's his personality. I think it's part of that Ranger organization. The players tend to be taught to be that way. But the thing that struck me here was, as he was, we went down memory lane a little bit his time with the Rangers, the part that you just talked about uprooting a family. They had just purchased a house in Westchester, New York, and, getting settled there. And then he gets traded down to Tampa, that whole uprooting, those kind of things. He was really great. He really was opening up, and, I felt a real connection during that interview. And, I'm hoping that's what came through in the article. Right off the bat, I didn't cut I cut right to the chase, and I asked him, did you ask to be traded? Because there are rumors flying around. I hadn't heard him ask that question at all. Did you ask for this? There are rumors out there saying that, maybe you just saw the writing on the wall and you asked the Rangers to get this done sooner rather than later, if it's going to happen, and it's not going to, so it doesn't carry on for months, have this hanging over your head. And, he unequivocally said, no, that was not the case. He had a conversation with Jeff Gorton, the Rangers general manager, when they asked for his list of teams that he would accept a trade to. But other than that, he said absolutely not. So, that was kind of the newsy part of it. And, like you said, he got into the family situation. It was very difficult on his wife. But if to get traded anywhere, what a soft landing spot coming to Tampa, as you talked about. The team that pretty much from right out of the gate has been first overall all year, Stanley Cup contender, a team hungry to win, that's been close to winning in the recent past. And, you're going to get traded with JT Miller, and you're going to rejoin Dan Girardi, Brian Callahan, and Anton Strawman. If there was ever a soft landing spot, that was it for Mac, for sure.
And no state income tax. Bonus. All right. Jim, thanks for your time. I really, really appreciate it. A lot of fun chatting with you today. Cheers.
Yeah, sounds good. Have a great day.
That's Jim Cerny of the Sporting News. I'm Conor McKenna. This is Hockey Primetime. Coming up next, is it really that hard to be an NHL general manager? I have a theory on this. I am going to share it with you next. This is Hockey Primetime on SiriusXM NHL Network Radio and streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. owners listening, believe me, I know quite a lot about hockey. I'm very opinionated. This is true, but I'm no genius, and I don't mean to give the impression that I am. But I'm not convinced I couldn't do it. I know people think that this type of thing is absurd. I'll say the same thing about like acting. People act like these actors are so amazing. What an amazing performance. How does it? They gave you a bunch of things to say. You pretended to be somebody else and you said the words. Is it really that difficult? Like, I'll give credit to Daniel Day-Lewis and Meryl Streep. Are you going to tell me that you couldn't do what Ben Affleck does given a month of preparation time? I don't know. Anyway, coming up next, it's hour number 2 of the show. I think I could be a general manager. Let's talk about the Clarkson Cup and the Isabel Cup. We're talking a little women's hockey on the other side. We'll get into the Winnipeg Jets as well. This is Hockey Primetime on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio and streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com.
Yeah.
Three, two, one. Hey, welcome back. This is Hockey Primetime here on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio, streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. We're also streaming the video of the show here live on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, Periscope, and other stuff too. I don't know. Instagram Live? Is that a thing?
No, I mean you can post a live video, but it becomes part of your story, kind of like a Snapchat.
Wow, interesting. I don't know what a Snapchat is, but I'll take your word for it. That's Laura Saba. I'm Conor McKenna, and we finished off the last hour talking about this. I really do believe this, that we tend to, and people sort of look at certain professions that, and there's this reverence for the people that do this job, which I sometimes think is a little bit misplaced. Now, the reason I say this is because I just finished ranting about how I believe I could be an NHL general manager, despite the fact that I'm not qualified for the job in the traditional sense. And by that, I mean having played in the National Hockey League or having a lifetime background in hockey like people do. But I've covered the National Hockey League for the last decade plus of my life. I certainly feel like I live and breathe hockey in many ways. Granted, I don't spend my my nights in rinks the way that I once did, based on my schedule and my current job. But listen, I'm not completely insane. As I was just saying off the air, I don't think I could be an airline pilot. I don't think I could go into court and be a lawyer. I don't think that I could go into a surgery and operate on somebody. I'm not insane. I understand that you have to be qualified to do those jobs, and you need a ton of sort of professional experience. But I'm telling you, man, I mean, based on what some of these guys are out here doing, are you going to tell me that I couldn't do a better job than Peter Chiarelli of running the Edmonton Oilers organization for the last couple of years? I'm not going to believe it. The same thing with Marc Bergevin here in Montreal. I do honestly think I could have done in the last several years, especially with the resources that the organization has, gone out and done a better job than Marc Bergevin has. Tell you one thing, and I said it at the time, you can check the tapes, I would have strongly explored trading Carey Price last year rather than signing him to that contract extension. And what was the rush on that to begin with? Here's another thing. Why do you have to sign Carey Price to a contract extension last year when he still has a year left on his contract? When did that become a thing that you have to do? Why not wait and see what happens this season? You're going to tell me that if Marc Bergevin didn't sign Carey Price to an extension, what would have happened? Oh, well, it would have been a distraction all year long. Really? I mean, could it really be any worse than it is right now for the Canadians? I don't think it would really make much of a difference if Carey Price's contract was
on the line,
except for the fact that right now Carey Price would make way less money on his next contract based on the season that he's having right now. I never understand that sort of rush to sign guys the day that they're eligible to be signed. What's going to happen? I guess there's two things that could happen. One of them is that Peter Chiarelli plays the long game with Leon Draisaitl, right? Remember, he waited to sign Draisaitl and ended up, I think, paying probably way more than he would have in that situation. But it's a two-way street. It goes both ways. And I'm not convinced that you have to get Carey Price under contract 1 year before the actual contract expires. That kind of thinking doesn't make any sense to me. Anyway, let's change gears from the Canadians to the Canadiens and the rest of the CWHL. Hannah Bevis is joining the show, back with us here for the first time in the last little while. She is the managing editor of the Ice Garden on SBNation, focusing on women's hockey. Hello, Hannah.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Oh, that was sounded kind of awkward. Okay, so let me start here in Montreal, and I know we've got, I mean, this is a big day for women's hockey right now. We have both the Clarkson and Isabel Cups going on. Markham Thunder, Clarkson Cup champions already. What happened to my Montreal Canadiens? I thought Hillary Knight was going to put them over the top, and that the Clarkson Cup was theirs. What happened to them?
You know, you're not the only one who thought that. I think a lot of people were very surprised that Les Canadiens did not make the final. You know, they got some Olympians back. They got Hillary Knight signing for them, and you know, they ran into a Markham Thunder team that's just been very hot, who also got back some Olympians and really showed that they are the real deal.
And that's it. I mean, that's why they play the games, right? We've seen in sports, there's a long storied history of teams sort of loading up and somehow not succeeding, and they're just sort of the latest ones to do it. Meanwhile, today, as we mentioned off the top, this is a massive day for women's hockey. Thank you for making time for us here today. I would imagine that you are very, very busy, but how's it going so far?
I'm not sure if you can hear. I'm trying to find a quiet place. I'm still at the where the Clarkson Cup at Ricoh Cup. Today's been a huge day with the Isabel Cup final and the NWHL in the U.S. and the CWHL Clarkson Cup in Canada. I mean, it's been crazy. It's been a whirlwind, and I don't know if you want to talk about what happened in the game with the Markham Thunder ultimately getting the Clarkson Cup, but it's been a very exciting day, that's for sure.
Yeah, pretty good day for Laura Stacey, wasn't it?
I'm sorry, what?
It was a pretty good day for Laura Stacey, I guess we could say.
I think she's having a pretty good day, that's for sure. She was, we talked to her post-game after she got that overtime winner, and she wasn't able to put into words what scoring that goal meant. She was just ecstatic, as the whole team was.
Laura Stacey comes back from the Olympics and scores the game-winning goal for the Markham Thunder to win the Clarkson Cup. How was the support and the atmosphere in the building?
It was pretty incredible, and it was actually pretty evenly split. There were quite a few Cunlin Red Star supporters here, and Markham's been running a thing all week trying to turn Rico green. So there were some fans with little green headbands with like little bobblehead things on them. So it was pretty evenly split, and I think they did a pretty good job filling Rico.
Were you glad that it was resolved in overtime and did not end up going to the shootout?
Yes, I am. There were quite a few media members who were hoping that it would not go to a shootout, but I think it's tricky because they've got the back-to-back with the Toronto Marlies at 4:30, so they weren't able to go to triple overtime like they had to in the semifinals. So the fact that it was resolved in overtime, I think, was a big sigh of relief for everybody.
So that's the CWHL championship resolved. In the NWHL, you got the Buffalo Buttes and Metropolitan Riveters going for it in the Isabel Cup final. Is this the last time that we're going to have both of these things happening at the same time? Can we dream that this seemingly inevitable merger is going to happen at some point soon?
I mean, there's been a lot of talk about it recently, and I think it's at the forefront of everyone's mind. It's something that I think players and staff too want to happen eventually, but because these are two very separate leagues with different, management, front offices, different ways of paying their players, different, and especially too, just locations. The CWHL is mainly in Canada, with the exception of one Boston team, and the NWHL is entirely in the United States. So, I mean, that's kind of a thing as well. So, I think everybody would like a merger to happen. I don't know that we see it in the next year, just because logistically it is so tricky to try and figure out if it's a merger, how that would work. If the NHL steps in, I'm not sure. There's a lot of different ways it could go. It doesn't have to be a merger necessarily.
But history has shown us, right? I mean, when it comes to pro sports, the NFL became the juggernaut it is today after the AFL merger, and Major League Baseball, even to go back a long, long time, the National League and the American League came together to make the sport what it is today. Even the NHL with the WHA, time after time after time, we've seen that this is sort of what will eventually happen if history is any indication. It's more a question of when than a question of if. So I guess my question would be, who are the powerful people responsible for making this happen? Like who? What are the names of these people?
I think you hit on the big question, and I think if we can figure that out, then that will get us one step closer to a merger or whatever it takes for one league to happen. Because right now there's a lot of different ways that it can go. The NHL is what a lot of people are talking about, and Gary Bettman recently came out with statements about if there's one league, then the NHL could maybe get involved, and USA Hockey and Hockey Canada are maybe options. I mean, in the past, if there are other organizations that want to step in, but I don't think anybody really has an actual answer to that question. I think a good first step would be for the two existing leagues to maybe sit down and talk to each other about it. But whether or not that's happening, or maybe that will happen because of all the chatter that's being brought up about one league, remains to be seen. Nothing public has been released about meetings between the two existing leagues yet.
Is there? I would imagine that they're sort of competing with one another. Are you aware of any sort of bad blood or negative feelings between the people running these two associations?
Well, the CWHL has been around for significantly longer. The NWHL started in 2015 and was originally planned to be an expansion team, and the CWHL is what I think was originally was the start. And then Danny Ryland decided that, well, she wants to have a hockey league instead, and the NWHL was born. And so I don't know that either commissioner is particularly fond of the other, but I think because of there's been a lot of changes in PR, so the messages have kind of been mixed. In general, I think they support the women's game and they want women's hockey to grow. to the other, then that's good, and they'll support that. And they've made that clear. But I don't think either league is particularly thrilled with the other.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see, and for the sake of the game, and this is the thing, and the thing that's so exciting, and we saw it in the Olympics. What leagues, and I'm convinced at least in 2018, what sports leagues need is stars, superstars, and personalities, and we saw this at the Olympics, and I know you get to see it all season long. In the CWHL and in the NWHL, there is star power, right? There are players that I believe can be sort of marketed and built around the so important, and they already have that, right?
Absolutely. And I think, you're talking about organizations that can come in and, what's it going to take for one league? I think if we're talking about organizations, mainstream media, we often don't see coverage at the women's hockey unless it's the Olympics or, we got actually some pretty good media coverage today at Clarkson, which is great, but these stars already exist. And we see the Hillary Knights on TV and she's a big name, but, there are players like Laura Stacey and Erica Howe and Liz Knox who are in the CWHL, who are, really big personalities, just stars in their games, who just often don't get a lot of media attention. And so I think if it starts being covered more regularly, that star power becomes more, evident in mainstream media. Who knows? Maybe the game can continue to grow at a faster pace.
I hope so. And I appreciate you joining us throughout the course of this season, Hannah. Thanks for making time for us. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I love being able to talk more women's hockey.
Cheers. So that's Hannah Bevis, and that is something that I definitely do make a conscious effort to try to do. And I'm sure could probably do a better job of, but not only to have female contributors on the show, because so often it's so normal that you don't even realize it, that the people that are on television and radio talking about hockey usually are white men. And I think it would be cool if that became a little bit less true, even though I am a white man. It's just, I think, again, in terms of the health of the game, it's probably something that would be good, right?
Well, I will say, as your producer, I do appreciate your willingness on this point. I do appreciate your suggestions all the time to have more women's hockey or more women contributors, and I do appreciate your openness to having more women have their voices on the air. I will say that.
It sounds good. It honestly, this is a big thing, and I love working, and it's tough in radio, sports radio. There's not a lot of women, and I love having a female voice as part of the show. I think it's really important, and it's nice, and hopefully we can give opportunities to people who are trying to break in, and I realize that it's really not an easy thing to do, and it's something that I think people are maybe sort of picking up on and noticing a little bit more than maybe they had been, but I think we still have a long way to go. Coming up next, let's talk Winnipeg Jets. What was that all about? Blake Wheeler and Ben Sherratt. That's how you say that guy's name. I knew that. Getting into a fight in practice, and Wheeler gets sent off. Coach sent him off. What's going on there? Do we have trouble in paradise? What a Jets team, and actually what a game tonight. Do you want to circle one on your calendar? Preds Jets is coming up tonight at, I believe it's at 7 o'clock. That is a hockey game worth watching. Two of the most exciting teams and two of the best teams in the NHL going head-to-head and division rivals. So that's going to be a nice rivalry for a long time based on the way those teams are built. Coming up next from the Winnipeg Free Press, we're talking to Jason Bell. Is there trouble in paradise, a.k.a. Winnipeg? Non-January, February Winnipeg category? We'll talk to Jason Bell from the Winnipeg Free Press next on Hockey Primetime, streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. What, Jesse? I'm sorry, I was talking about food. What were you saying?
Line A goal coming back.
Thanks.
You're all good, man.
Grabbed off and cleared off the boards by Julius Honka all the way back to the Jets line. Bufflin quickly back in for Stastny. Line A scores! Deflected pass to Patrick Laine, and Laine puts this right through the pillows of Kari Lehtinen for Laine's second of the game, and the Jets are up 3-1.
Yeah, they're pretty good, eh? Those Winnipeg Jets. What a great season. And you see, I've definitely criticized Kevin Cheveldayoff and his seemingly overly patient approach over the years, but we're certainly seeing it bear fruit right now. I think the most encouraging thing, if you're a Jets fan, is I don't see how this team doesn't get even better in the next couple of years. It should be a classic tonight between the Jets and the Predators, the two best teams in the Western Conference this year, for my money anyway, and it should be a great, great game between those two, and maybe hopefully a little more competitive than it was the last time those two teams met. With more on these Jets, what's going on? Fights in practice? Jason Bell is with the Winnipeg Free Press. How you doing, sir?
Real good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for making time for us here. So Blake Wheeler and Ben Sherratt going at it in practice. This happens every once in a while, I realize, and I know that they sort of downplayed it. What do you make of it?
Well, it was an odd occurrence, that's for sure. We were sitting there on a Saturday afternoon wishing we were somewhere else on a Saturday afternoon practice with a winning hockey club. It's, things have been going along real swimmingly with this organization. And then all of a sudden our attention was focused to some special teams work the club was doing, and Blake Wheeler fires a puck that's absolutely nowhere near the vicinity of the net and kind of almost takes out a couple of guys, and there's actually kind of almost a hush because it was a purposeful looking shot, and then Ben Sherratt kind of wades towards him, and they get into it, and there's some good punches thrown, actually. As I say, it was a pretty weird thing to see, and some guys separated them, and Paul Maurice did some screaming and yelling and got Blake Wheeler off the ice. And, of course, afterwards it was, there was much ado about nothing when it came to the hockey club and the coach and Ben Sherratt. And we spoke to the captain today, and he said the same thing, did take blame for it, said that it was a bit of a blunder on his part. He just kind of, emotions got the better of him, and there was apologies all around, and everybody sang Kumbaya, and we're all happy again. So.
Yeah, nothing a win over Nashville tonight couldn't fix, I would imagine. So it's interesting, though, because I guess I heard two different things. I had heard that Wheeler took exception to Sherratt giving the business to Mark Scheifele, but that's not what happened? Well,
initially that's what some of us were led to believe, but we never got anybody to actually tell us that. It did seem like there was a bit of jostling in front during the drill. Nothing that was, I didn't think it was anything sort of untoward, but perhaps that is what happened. Although Scheifele told us after that he was an innocent bystander in all this, and that he wasn't involved. In fact, he was just trying to be peacemaker. So whether that's what raised the ire of the Jets captain, I guess no one's quite sure. We didn't really ask him point blank again what got him so riled up today. It was, again, they were trying to move past it, and they were making light of it, but something certainly got him a little bit worked up. And I mean, Blake Wheeler's an intense cat. There's no question. He plays that way. He's had a remarkable season, and he's been a great leader for this club, wearing the C for the very first season. So, what actually got him going, I'm not sure, but they've kind of quashed whatever it was, and they're ready to move on at this point.
I think the thing that we sometimes forget. And I think that often the way that we mythologize hockey and all that is you forget that to these guys, at least in a way, this is their workplace, this is their work environment, and this is their job. And who among us has not had a coworker that they don't get along with? This is something that happens. The main difference is they also are in this unique work environment where punching the guy in the face that you don't like is actually allowed. Right? I mean, how many times has anybody at work been like, wow, I'd really like to punch that guy in the face? You can't do it. You're going to lose your job. You might end up going to jail. In hockey, that's not the case. Right, Jason?
Well, and as Paul Maurice pointed that out, I mean, how do you explain this to your kids? Well, there are different sets of rules for different situations and scenarios. And, things are handled in a different way in the hockey arena than they are at the office or the grocery store or in the Winnipeg Free Press newsroom. The only thing that I would suggest to you is that, and again, they've kind of moved past this, and actually, a lot of us, including myself, have taken a beating from some readers saying, why are you guys making a big deal out of this? Well, we weren't making a big deal out of it. We were reporting something that absolutely happened as fact. We weren't torquing it. We weren't punching holes in an organization that's done everything right this season. Nothing could be further from the truth. We were just reporting something odd that happened at a practice that any reporter would have in the same situation if I was at the Winnipeg Manitoba legislature and a fight broke out there. Now, that probably would be a lot sexier than if that happened at the Winnipeg Jets practice. I get that. The only thing that I think is a little bit troublesome is that if Blake Wheeler, that shot hits Paul Stastny in the ankle, as it very well could have, and Paul Stastny is done for the season, would we shrug it off as it's just boys being boys? I suggest not. And if Blake Wheeler took a punch like we thought he took from Ben Sherratt, and he's concussed today, would we shrug it off as boys being boys? Well, I suggest not, because it would have a very, very big impact on the Winnipeg Jets for the rest of the season. But, nobody got hurt. Everything was fine, and they move along. And as you suggested, they've got a big one against Nashville, a team that's got 3 wins on them this year. And the Jets are still clinging to a hope that they could maybe catch the Predators in the race for the Central Division lead. And right now they're 6 points back, and the Preds are coming off a loss in Minnesota last night. The Jets are wanting to give a real good show tonight.
Yeah, and you mentioned the feedback from readers, and as somebody who works in media, I can relate to that. The simple fact is, and I'm sure you know this, Jason, is had you guys not brought it up, then people would be complaining about that. So either way, it's as you mentioned, you're just doing your job, and that's just the thing. Some people get upset when people.
There was a suggestion that there's the most outlandish suggestion that there is footage out there that we're refusing to show. Well, the fact remains that the Saturday noon practice after a Jet game, media was few and far between because, again, they were going to play today. They were going to skate today. So even the Jets' own internal fellas that do the Jets TV did not have the cameras rolling because it was just a simple practice with again, special teams drills going on. Nobody shot this. Nobody has any video of any of this. It just happened. It was over in 15 seconds, and we're not hiding anything.
Controversial. The Wheeler tape, Zapruder tape. Eat your heart out. The Wheeler tape now is out here in the annals of conspiracy theory. All right, so Jason Bell is on with us here, covering the Winnipeg Jets for the Free Press. So one of the people who was fortunate enough to witness the incident that occurred at Jets practice yesterday. Meanwhile, we can talk about the hockey stuff, and I wanted to ask you about the Paul Stastny effect. That was a real coup that Kevin Cheveldayoff was able to land him at the trade deadline, and he appears to have sort of slid into this lineup seamlessly. What have you noticed in terms of the effect that Paul Stastny has had since joining the team?
Well, first and foremost, again, you said off the top, Kevin Cheveldayoff, as the general manager of the Winnipeg Jets, has come under fire over the course of the 7 years that the club has been here for not being active at trade deadlines and not doing enough to bolster a lineup. Even last year, when they were in a bit of a race, he didn't really do much at the end to try and ignite things and maybe make a late push to make the playoffs. And really, they were focused last year on a draft lottery, which turned out to be worth its weight in gold, obviously, with the makeup of Patrick Laine. But this year, we weren't sure what he was going to do, and I think there was a suggestion out there that he wanted to get some depth on defense, and maybe he would make a move to get another center iceman, especially when Mark Scheifele and Adam Lowry were going through some injury problems. And they were both due back, but I think he was looking to strengthen up the middle. The name that came absolutely out of the blues, as it were, was Paul Stastny, and it just was not on anybody's radar. And, I think I can honestly say that it shocked all of us. And it even shocked, a lot of the heavyweights in Toronto, the media guys that are really tapped in. This came out of nowhere. And he's done a masterful job, Paul Stastny. This is a great two-way center that has great vision, that is a real heady player, and is probably having a real fun time right now playing with a guy like Patrick Line, who's up to 43 goals, and Nikolai Ehlers, who got his 28th the other night. And that line is really flying right now for the Winnipeg Jets.
It is amazing that it's not inconceivable, although unlikely based on the pace, but not inconceivable that Line still gets to 50 goals on the season, and he has just been lighting it up lately. And I mean, that's got to be a lot of fun, isn't it? I remember, and I was lucky enough to sort of, and my career in this business has coincided with that of Carey Price. So covering him as a rookie and a young player, the first year I was doing it was the first year that Price was in the league. It's amazing, isn't it, to watch these a remarkable sort of almost generational, I think you could say, hockey player. He's still only 19 years old, Jason, and doing the things that he's doing. It makes work a lot of fun, doesn't it?
Well, watching and I'm an impartial observer. I mean, I'm not ashamed to admit that I grew up a Winnipeg Jets fan. I was born and raised in this city. I was right from the World Hockey Association and winning AFCO Cups and watching the Jets struggle along, the Jets 1.0, and having some real talented teams, but never getting past Edmonton. But, I really do I'm more concerned about deadlines than I am about wins and losses this time. But you're right. Watching a winning hockey club, and in particular, watching a young talent like Patrick Line has been one of the great perks of this job this year. And it was my father who just said that. It must be so fun to watch this guy play. And we're so wrapped up in sort of the minutiae of covering the National Hockey Team that you forget just the obvious joy of watching a guy, ply his trade like that. And he is just a kid, and he really, really is just fun to be around too, because he is so open and honest and kind of aw shucks and says some funny things, obviously. And then you see the shot and you see the goals he scores, and you really are on the edge of your seat whenever he's got a free look. And Winnipeg Jet fans are a pretty lucky bunch right now to have him at this time and place.
And he looks like, if you gave that guy a helmet with horns on it, like, he would not look the least bit out of place raiding villages, 1,000 years ago. Guy looks like a Viking, especially with that facial hair. True or false?
Yeah, he's got that Nordic look, and he's very blonde and very fair and very a tall kid, obviously. And again, we just. He's been so available to us on the road at home. They haven't thrown up the protective shield like, as some of the PR types are known to do. They've let Patrick be Patrick, and he's been a boon to us. We can write ad nauseum about Patrick Line, but there's a lot of great stories about the Winnipeg Jets right now, and they're getting great goaltending from Connor Hellebuck. They've cut down their goals against drastically. They've cut down their minor penalties drastically. They've got a great young squad. They've got, when the defense is healthy, I mean, they've got a great top six, and it translates into a team that's, as you suggested, is one of the best in the Western Conference.
And tonight, we've got about 2.5 hours to go until game time. This should be a lot of fun between the Winnipeg Jets and the Nashville Predators, still duking it out. And I mean, in all likelihood, right, these two teams are going to be meeting in the playoffs, at least the way that we're going right now, and that should be pretty cool, eh?
Yeah, I mean, it looks like the Jets will settle into second, and probably the Minnesota Wild will take the third spot in the Central, and there's your first round matchup, and it's kind of a neat rivalry here, and geographical purposes, Minneapolis is 7 hours south of us by car, and the closest rival, and they've kind of, they've had some great runs at each other just in the regular season. I think the Jets have taken 3 or 4 this year, but that'll be a good first round series. I would expect that the Jets are favored to win that series, and that sets up something with Nashville. If Nashville can get past that last wild, or that second or last wild card, whichever they'll end up facing, whether that's an Anaheim or St. Louis, or we don't know yet. But you're right, the Jets Nashville would be a great series, and I think you're going to have that playoff feel tonight. I don't believe Pecorine is playing tonight. Connor Hellebuck will play tonight, but it should be a good one.
And that UC Saros is no slouch either. They're the Nashville backup. All right, thank you, Jason. A real pleasure and a lot of fun chatting with you today.
Yeah, good stuff. Thanks again.
There's Jason Bell from the Winnipeg Free Press on the Winnipeg Jets. Game of the night tonight, Nashville, Winnipeg. And maybe Pecorine sits this one out. Saros still only 22 years old, so he's got a nice long career ahead of him. Coming up next, we're going to talk with Chris Peters. Let's start looking forward to the draft, right? Well, what are we? What's the date today? Let's see. Do we 25? So we're almost 1 month to the day, I believe, from what we're expecting to be the NHL draft lottery. And I want to know what kind of a draft we're looking at. ESPN's Chris Peters is going to be joining us. We haven't chatted with Chris in a while. Last time I saw that guy was in Fort Lauderdale, I guess. It's been a while. So looking forward to chatting with him. Chris Peters of ESPN on the upcoming NHL draft. A dream debut for Ryan Donato in Boston. All that and more is coming up next. This is Hockey Primetime on SiriusXM NHL Network Radio. The show also streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com.
Yeah. Chris is on the line, coming back with the Ryan Donato goal.
Bruins with the puck might have a 2-on-1. Donato over the line, right side into the right circle, drops for Krug. Donato shoots, he scores! Listen to the Boston Bruins fans erupt as Ryan Donato sizzles in a one-timer in the far circle, and he ties the game at 1 for the Bruins.
Not too shabby, eh, Ryan Donato? In the National Hockey League. What a life. I mean, it's already impressive enough to be a student at Harvard. Granted, his dad is the coach, but he's clearly a pretty good player. And what a debut for this kid. He's got his books. He's studying on the road, classes by day, scoring goals in NHL games by night. Pretty sweet life for young Ryan Donato. And what an embarrassment of riches the Bruins seem to have as far as the young players on that team. So many young guys contributing on entry-level contracts. And then there's guys like David Pastrnak, who's not on an entry-level contract, but he's still so young. You forget because he's been around for so long. With more on Ryan Donato and the youth movement around the National Hockey League, it is a pleasure to welcome back to the show from ESPN's NHL coverage, Chris Peters. Hello.
Hey, Connor, how you doing?
I'm doing great, and thank you. It's nice to hear your voice again. It's been a while.
Yeah, too long. I'm glad to be back. It's good to be with you.
Thank you, and yeah, we appreciate it. So well, let's start here. I mean, as far as debuts go, you could certainly do a lot worse than what Ryan Donato did this week, couldn't you?
Yeah, I would say so. You know, just going ahead and scoring some goals and taking some classes at Harvard. I mean, it's unbelievable. But, you know, just kind of following his career and kind of his arc in development over these last really 2 years, I would say, it's not necessarily surprising to see him hop right in and be a contributor. I mean, he's one of those players that he's never really played outside of Boston, except for a couple games he played in the USHL with Omaha after his prep school season. So what luck with that? You know, I mean, just going to Harvard, playing at Dexter school there, and just being able to kind of spend your entire career at home has been really awesome for him. And obviously we're seeing that he's making good on the Bruins picking him and keeping him home, because he's got such a tremendous shot. He's obviously got some good size. His skating has improved immensely over the last couple of years. And, I think he's just a quality kid and a quality prospect that the Bruins, I'm sure, are just absolutely over the moon about.
No kidding. And, nice little addition to the team at this time of the year. It's a real nice luxury to be able to add a guy and have him be a difference maker at this time of the year. I know that you guys, and I got to say, honestly, that ESPN's NHL coverage has never been better. I go and I visit all the time to see the terrific work that you and Greg and Amalie are doing on the site. So I'm very, very happy about that, and it's great news for the game. And one thing I was reading and something that went up recently was about, and it was you guys talking about Don Sweeney, the general manager of the Bruins, and the way that his reputation and the fashion in which his reputation has just done a complete 180 in the last, well, I guess you could say the last year or so, and maybe even less than that, right? I mean, expectations weren't that high for the Bruins this year, but now all of a sudden they're this fast, young, exciting team stacked with young players. It's remarkable, isn't it, the way that Don Sweeney's reputation has been sort of rehabilitated in a way?
Yeah, no question. I mean, I think back to, just the way that he was perceived, and by me too. I mean, I put it in the story that you're referencing, where we kind of talked in a roundtable fashion about, does he deserve an apology? And I think that the criticism at the time, based on the information that we had, was warranted, and really some of the worst decisions that he's made have not gotten fixed. It's not like they were things that kind of, like, the Bolesky deal, the 3 straight draft picks where really only Jake DeBrusk has played at the NHL level. I still think it's too early to judge the 2015 draft for them, because, prospects take different times, and Zach Senyshyn, who was their 3rd pick in that 3 straight, it was kind of a long-term project anyway. But, Matt Barzal was on the board still. Kyle Connor was on the board still. They did get Brandon Carlo in the 2nd round, and he's an everyday defenseman for them for the most part this season. But that was a real key factor in kind of the narrative surrounding Don Sweeney. And I think the most important move that he's made to date is, getting rid of Claude Julien when he did, and bringing in Bruce Cassidy. Because you look at the turnaround that's happened under Cassidy, and the fact that, they had all these guys in the American Hockey League that were on the cusp and were ready. And I'm talking about Danton Heinen, Matt Grzelcyk, guys like that have come in, and Jake DeBrusk as well, who have come in and been key contributors for this team. And it's kind of similar to how the Tampa Bay Lightning worked with John Cooper, where they gave him an opportunity coming up from the AHL, and all of a sudden he had the stars that were already there, the core that was already there, but then he also had his guys from the AHL where they had success and won the Calder Cup, and that provided some continuity for the organization and injected new life into it. And I think that's the key decision that Don Sweeney has made that has really helped turn the whole thing around for him.
You're right, and I think it's a great comparison with what's happened there in Tampa, and it's proof as well, right? Cassidy was a cast off as an NHL head coach, and this is something that we saw with Mike Sullivan in Pittsburgh as well, right? Proof that you can not succeed in your first sort of run as an NHL head coach and still come back and have a tremendous amount of success as much as 10 or more years later.
Yeah, and I think that's just kind of the valuable lessons that those guys learned, and having to go back and kind of starting from square one, and either going in the American League or in Mike Sullivan's case, he was basically scouting for the Blackhawks as a pro scout. He's out of coaching, and you think about some of the things that he's managed to do since then, and I think that we're going to see that with other guys. I think there are a lot of coaches that were kind of put in a bad situation, a tough situation, where there really was no path for success. And I think like Dallas Aikens might be one of those guys where he gets another opportunity based on kind of the fact that some of these second chance guys are having such success. But I think that it's really interesting to me to just kind of see, I don't know that general managers were so willing to give those second chances back in the day. And now we got a guy like Don Sweeney, Steve Yzerman. They think a little bit differently, maybe. And I'm just really impressed with the fact that, those are two guys that played at a high level, that seems to be pretty insular, and they think a certain way, but those guys don't seem to, and I think that's an important thing for their organizations.
Because I usually Google people before I have them on the air, and when I Google your name, Chris, one thing that popped up was you doing something in Winnipeg. I don't know if it was a radio appearance recently, and talking about this kid CJ Seuss that they just signed to a contract. What can you tell me about him?
Yeah, well, he's had a great 4-year career back at Minnesota State, and he just had a season ended. Unfortunately, Minnesota State lost to Minnesota Duluth. Didn't have a great game, but he's one of these guys that the Jets seem to get pretty regularly. They tend to look at guys in the U.S. college hockey and junior ranks, guys that they know are going to be sitting in their colleges or with their respective teams for 3 to 4 years. They're not going to need him for a while. They just let him sit there and develop. And he's kind of a good example of that, because CJ, it's actually pronounced Cease. It is like Dr. Seuss, but it's Cease. And I've messed that up like so many times just because my mind sees it. But Cease is actually he also went through a name change as well. So that's a whole other thing. But he's an interesting guy because I think that he's physically strong. He's got really quick hands. It's not like a high-end elite skill player where he's going to come in and he's going to help you in your top 6. But I think he's a guy that will help Manitoba immediately in the American Hockey League, has a good opportunity to make it as a bottom 6 guy in the NHL level, has a good motor, and again, that physical strength. And he was the captain at Minnesota State, which has been a program that is really on the rise and has become a good development ground for professional players. So credit to Mike Hastings and his staff there for what they've done. And unfortunately, they were looking for their first NCAA tournament win in school history, and they looked like they had a team that could do it this year, but unfortunately fell short.
So I have to be an ESPN Insider subscriber to see your full list of the top 50 prospects in the National Hockey League, but I do see that Elias Pettersson is number 1 on the list. Was that a hard call to make?
It was a hard call to make. I think the top 3 are really tight. And to me, it's the top 3 are him, Eeli Tolvanen, and Casey Middlestat. And I think there's, we look at what they've done. The deciding factor for me was the fact that Elias Pettersson is a top line player on a very good Swedish Hockey League team. And it's not just that he broke the U20 scoring record in that league, though that is important. It's not, he's a guy that his teammates, when they need offense, they're looking to him. They're looking to him to create. They're deferring to him. He gets set up on one of the face-off circles and he lets it fly. He's really sharp on the power play. He has the puck skills to get the puck into the zone. Good size. I think he needs to get stronger. There's no question about that. That's probably the biggest thing that he needs to work on if he's going to make an impact at the next level. But I just think the upside there with what he's done already at a high level of hockey, the fact that he is such an important piece and has had the experience of being the guy on a team at 19 years old is really the core thing for me, where it's just, that is invaluable experience that I think will help him at the next level. I think Rasmus Dahlin is the top prospect outside of the NHL right now, but full stop. But Pettersson has kind of started to trend into that range because he has such skill level, and obviously having done what he did this year with Växjö was incredible. So I think that he's a guy that Canucks fans have every reason to be excited about. I think there are going to be some adjustments for him. He's got to get better on the small rink. I think he had an up and down World Junior tournament where he was playing in those tougher games, got a little more difficult for him. But once he gets past that, I think he's going to have a really great career and obviously a great start with what he did and all the names that he passed up on his way to getting the record. Kent Nilsson, Peter Forsberg, the Sedins, Marcus Naslund. I mean, it's unbelievable, that list, to see where he is on it now.
Wow. That's really cool, and something to be excited about if you're a Canucks fan, I guess, right? If you've got him and Brock Besser, you're ahead of the curve, I guess, in some ways. Is it safe to think, although I'd be a little bit terrified that Jim Benning's still in charge if I was a Canucks fan, but that maybe they could turn things around sooner than later?
Well, still quite a bit of work. Having Besser, having Bo Horvat, having Pettersson is important. We still got to see what's going to happen with Olli Juolevi, who's now playing in Finland and had a good season. I think he played well. I think it was good for his development to go back home and play professionally as opposed to going back to the OHL. And he was also out of the spotlight, which is going to help him too. But there's a
break soon
panning out. But they have other guys like Cole Lind in the WHL has been really good, and Jonah Gadjevich in the OHL. So there are players for them that they can kind of start filtering in. But when you're in this kind of transitional phase where you still have the veteran guys like the Sedins, and what are you going to do next with them, and what are you going to do with other guys in your roster that just aren't working out? That's a process, and then you have to figure out, okay, how do we establish a winning culture again? I mean, they had such a great culture, through the 2000s where they were making deep runs and having an opportunity to go to the Stanley Cup final. And how do you get that back? And I think guys like Besser, guys like Pettersson, that's going to help a lot, because those guys seem to thrive on that. They want that opportunity. Having followed Besser since his junior days, this has really been kind of a surprising rise. I did not expect him to have this great of a rookie season right out the gate, but we see how much work he put in last summer, and it's really paid off. So having guys like that you can rally around, I think will help the organization. But I don't necessarily think it's going to be a quick turnaround, but they have some core pieces that are going to help them move forward and at least give their fans some optimism and some things to look forward to. And I think that they've made some changes in their scouting department in recent years. Judd Brackett's their director of amateur scouting now, is a guy I respect a lot, and I think he has a lot of good opinions on players, and you see these kind of high-end skill guys coming into the draft, and they're not missing on them very often. So I think that's a good thing for the Canucks going forward.
It does seem to be one area that Jim Benning's front office has done well is in the draft. Chris Peters of ESPN, prospects writer, and you can read his work at ESPN.com, part of the team there. Thank you for your time. I wish we had more of it. Really a pleasure to chat with you.
All right, great to be with you, Connor. Thanks for having me.
There's Chris Peters. I'm Conor McKenna. We're back to wrap things up right after this. This is Hockey Primetime here on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio and streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. do, right? I can't do that. I have to watch hockey, and the games always go till about 10 o'clock. So like the earliest I can go to bed is like 10:30. Otherwise, I'm not watching the sports I'm supposed to be talking about. It's horrible. Anyway, it's a good life. 3. Oh, right. Forgot.
Memorizing rebound. Pause. He shoots and scores on a long range shot. It's in front. Might have been touched on the way in. And the Penguins have won this game by the score of 5-4. And ladies and gentlemen, Elvis has just left the building. Ryan Rush may have touched that puck in around the goal.
Yeah, that was it. And you might have missed it. Hey, did you catch that? The game-winning goal by Brian Rust this afternoon. Now, I've heard from people in Vancouver. I've heard from people in the United States, and it wasn't everybody. Some people did not have this happen, but I was watching this game, and at 3 o'clock sharp Eastern Standard Time, NBC cut to coverage of whatever the PGA Tour event that is happening right now is. And this was during the 3-on-3 overtime. The 3-on-3 overtime was happening. They cut away from it, went to golf right in the middle. Like it wasn't even a stoppage in play.
And it was like just people wandering around. Like it wasn't even something going on. We watched some golfers wandering around in the sun.
Golfers warming up. Right? Taking a couple of practice cuts. And then they finally somebody realizes what's just happened, and they press the button and go back, and the game is over. The Penguins players are on the ice celebrating, and I wish I could say that this was surprising or that this was the first time that this has happened. And maybe I'm wrong. I'm not an expert in television broadcasting, but I will lay the blame for this at the feet of NBC. That's the channel I was watching. And how often have we seen this happen? NBC cuts away from a double overtime game so that they can show the Kentucky Derby, or not even the 2.5 hour lead up to the Kentucky Derby that they're broadcasting on television. I think that there is a lack of, I don't know, let's say the care level when it comes to NBC and the National Hockey League doesn't appear to be
the compete level.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, look, they have good people. Doc Emmerich is a great broadcaster. Ed Olczyk, and great news about him. They do a good job. Pierre McGuire, however you feel about him, is a guy
everything.
Who works his ass off, right?
He knows everything.
Anyway, there's something there where we don't get the coverage, I think, in the United States that we deserve as hockey fans, and I think NBC could do a lot better. And that's just one example of what we saw happen today. But that's Bush League. Come on now. You imagine that happening in the NFL or somewhere else? I can't. Anyway, thank you to Laura Saba. Thank you to Jesse at SiriusXM, our executive producer, Sam Wu. I'm Conor McKenna. We'll be back next week. What time?
3 to 5.
3 to 5 next Sunday. We'll talk to you. I hope you enjoy what's left of the weekend, wherever it is that you are, and enjoy the games this week, especially Preds and Jets tonight at 7 o'clock Eastern. That should be a lot of fun. Anyway, can't wait. Already looking forward to next week. Enjoy the rest of the weekend.
Great show, guys. Flew by.
Thanks, Jesse.